Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. Our dear friend and regular commenter, Phil Giraldi, joins us now. Phil, thanks very much. Always a pleasure. Some recent news in the past 24 hours, one of which you wrote extensively about in a brilliant and gifted and devastating analysis, and that is the United States vetoing, I believe now for the third time, a resolution in the UN Security Council calling upon the Israeli government to cease fire in Gaza. The other news, this is just hot news that happened in the past 15 minutes, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has ordered Rafah to be evacuated. To where? We'll start with the UN, about which you have written this sophisticated analysis. Is it just hopeless to expect that the UN can achieve any measure of protection for the Palestinian people in the face of the slaughter and genocide visited upon them by the Israeli government?
Well, yes. I mean, the fact is that the UN was set up basically to deal with these kinds of international situations by setting up mechanisms that would unite countries to intervene if something like a genocide or something like that were to be taking place. The problem is when the UN was set up, it was set up with five members who were permanent members of the Security Council and who have vetoes. The United States has basically been the problem here. They, on three occasions, as you noted, have vetoed attempts to initiate a ceasefire, and these attempts were all different. I mean, they had different features and different ways of going about it, and a lot of the discussion that went into these proposals were uh, basically out of consideration of the United States veto and how to make the United States or to convince the United States that a ceasefire and negotiations would be in everyone's interest. So the United States is the bad player here. Israel is going to do whatever they can to basically get rid of the Palestinians, and accepting that, the United States should not be cooperating in the effort because there are 30,000 dead, including 12,000 children. And the Israelis are still bombing in the north, bombing in the south. And as you noted, they are now going to make another move into Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians are sheltering and they have nowhere to go.
Are a majority of Americans opposed to what the Israelis are doing in Gaza and to the American support of it by supplying the weapons and ammunition and spare parts that the IDF uses in order to perpetrate slaughter?
Well, the polls that I've seen over the past 2 weeks seem to indicate that there has been a swing away from the usual knee jerk support of Israel. They have a right to defend themselves, this kind of nonsense that Nancy Pelosi is so good at. And it seems from the polls that there certainly is a distinct swing towards a ceasefire because nobody likes to see this kind of carnage. And there are various views in terms of what comes next. But at this point, we just basically have to stop the killing and we have to start talking. And once you are talking, you can raise the issues that you have nearest to your heart and try to resolve them. And the U.S. is basically not helping this process. And of course, Israel is not helping either.
Your guard dog apparently detected the presence of someone, but it was quite exciting to see him bolt from his usual happy position over your left shoulder, Phil.
Yeah, his
Uh,
mommy just came home, I think.
oh, okay, got it, got it. There's the Security Council now. I have to mention this Nancy Pelosi nonsense because what she said is really absurd. I mean, last week she said that the demonstrations for a ceasefire in the United States were fomented by Vladimir Putin. I mean, you talk about a disconnect. yesterday. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, because this is so preposterous. I almost can't believe that she said it, but you reported it. She purportedly said, well, the IDF is not using any equipment or ammunition or bombs that the U.S. sent. They're using their own, so don't blame us. Did she say that? And is it, by any stretch of an imagination, if she said it, true?
Yeah, I saw the clip where she said it. And of course, in addition to the Russians, she also mentioned it could be the Chinese who were fomenting these demonstrations too. Because, there are a lot of enemies out there, apparently, except for Israel. She's incredible. She's an idiot. And she says these things, and 200, I've seen press in the New York Times, in fact, some of the effect of 200 or 2,000 tons of munitions have been shipped by air by the Biden administration to Israel, and they are certainly being used. I mean, there were very specific weapons that they called for, including these bunker buster bombs that weigh 2,000 pounds and were dropped on a number of several hospitals in northern Gaza. And these tank munitions that were specially flown over there, $300 million worth. These are used in urban fighting to blow up buildings and that sort of thing. So either she's so badly informed that she feels compelled to say these things to cover up her ignorance, or basically she's just she should not be answering things that where she's gonna. She feels she has to lie, and there's too much lying going on.
These 2,000-pound bombs, which could probably destroy almost anything, are they smart bombs, or are they just guided by gravity?
They are, I believe, guided by gravity. The principle behind them is you get right over the target, and you open the bomb bay, and the thing comes out, and it weighs 2,000 pounds, and it makes a huge crater and destroys the building that you're hitting. I don't think they're smart bombs, but I would want to check on that.
Here's Mrs. Pelosi with the nonsense about President Putin.
And what we have to do is try to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is women and children, people who don't have a place to go. So let's address that. But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message. Mr. Putin's message. Make no mistake, this is directly connected to what he would like to see. Same thing with Ukraine. It's about Putin's message. I think some of these protesters are spontaneous and organic and sincere. Some, I think, are connected to Russia. And I say that having looked at this for a long time now, as you know.
You think some of these protests?
Well, she's a lunatic to make any kind of comment like that. She's also a lunatic to say that the Israelis are not using what we're sending them. You and Conor McGregor and Scott Ritter, Larry Johnson, Ray McGovern, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Matei, almost everybody with whom we've discussed this have said that Joe Biden could stop this with a phone call. Hey, Bibi, stop the slaughter, or the weapons, the ammo, and the spare parts will stop. And they will stop, and the IDF will not have more than a few days left.
Well, I mean, the sad thing is here that we're talking about a ceasefire, and of course, the latest Biden message is to say that he voted against the resolution in the Security Council and presented his own, is that he's putting up a temporary ceasefire. See, so inevitably that means the Israelis can start the fighting again, and they would. So we need a ceasefire so that people will sit down and talk. And if he can't see that, the bodies of all those little kids in Gaza and the ones we haven't even discovered yet that are buried in the rubble. I mean, how many we need? 30,000 more dead Palestinians to make Joe Biden wake up? I don't know what it takes.
Well, we need a ceasefire, not so people can talk, but so that people can eat. drink water rather than starving to death. We're going to show you an eye-opening and tear-inducing clip about a 4-year-old girl, a Palestinian girl, in a vehicle by herself. Everybody else in the vehicle is dead. She manages to use the phone and talk to the Red Crescent, which is their version of the Red Cross, to save her. The Red Crescent, the drivers are motioned by the IDF, go ahead, you can save her. And as they approach her, of course, the IDF slaughters the 2 drivers, and I'm sorry to say, this beautiful young girl. Here we go.
Look, that speech broke your heart. You wanted something else? There's a tape right now of the 6-year-old girl on the phone to the rescuer, or 4-year-old. I mean, she's a very young girl, and she's scared. She's in the car with her dead parents, her dead uncle, aunt, dead cousins, and she's begging for them to come and get her. Please come. I'm scared. It's getting dark.
What happened?
So listen to that. And if you're a father, if you're an uncle, if you're somebody who has, a niece of that age, imagine that being her. Imagine it being.
Hang on, Phil.
Her young life cut short. 6-year-old Hind Rajab was found dead this weekend in this car alongside 5 members of her family. 12 days after the little girl's desperate pleas for help went viral. Hind's 15-year-old cousin called the Palestinian Red Crescent, saying their car was coming under fire from Israeli forces, until she went silent.
انتوا متخبيين؟
في السيارة احنا زميلة الضبابة.
انتوا جوا السيارة؟
Well, it's just it's hard to find words to describe this. That they would slaughter a 4-year-old girl, a baby, and the 2 unarmed EMS people that were out there to try and save her or salvage the lives of the others that have already been killed. What bothers me is that no state actors are doing anything about this. The president of Turkey has condemned it soundly. He hasn't lifted a finger. The king of Jordan has condemned it. He hasn't lifted a finger. Joe Biden claims he has these arguments on the phone with Netanyahu. All he has to do is tell the DOD, stop sending these monsters the equipment that we're sending them. Great Britain does whatever the U.S. wants, the same for Western Europe. No state actor has lifted a finger to stop this, Phil. So I guess it's just going to keep going on because it's not going to stop from within. The Israeli public lauds this monstrosity.
Yeah, and Joe Biden is facilitating this. He could stop it, and he basically is creating conditions in his dealings with the United Nations where, he is basically blocking a ceasefire. He's blocking the killing that's going on. I mean, this is just unspeakable. Today, there was another incident like the one you described with the little girl, where a food convoy, the UN was running a food convoy into Gaza, and they cleared it with the Israelis. And the Israelis told them the route they should take to get the food into Gaza. And what happened? The convoy went into Gaza on the route that the Israelis had promised was safe, and the Israelis attacked the convoy and destroyed it. This is just, this goes beyond the horrors of anything we've experienced in the last 50 years. And yet, as you point out, it goes on, and the players who could make this stop sitting on their hands.
And yet McGovern, Ritter, you, Johnson, McGregor, Professors Sachs and Mearsheimer all say this is not going to stop from within. It's only going to stop from without, and it will probably stop by Israeli hubris if they decide to attack Hezbollah, which whipped them last time and which appears to be the stronger military force this time. Do you agree?
Yeah, the Israelis are overreachers by their very nature in terms of how they see themselves in the Middle East, and they at this point are riding high. They probably think they can get away with anything, and to take on Lebanon and push their plan to push Hezbollah back up north of the Litani River ain't going to work. And they bombed Damascus yesterday. That's Syria, bringing them into it. I mean, this is just like, when does it ever end? And when does the United States subservience to Israel, as exercised by people like Donald Trump and also Joe Biden, when is this going to end? When are they going to make us Americans proud again to be Americans?
Well, who controls Washington? Joe Biden or Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, it would seem it's Benjamin Netanyahu. He basically goes ahead, and if Biden even squeaks something, Netanyahu tells him to go to hell, and Biden sits there and takes it. And there have been stories that I'm sure you've seen where Biden, when he goes back into his room and collects his 6 brain cells, he's cursing out Netanyahu and that sort of thing. But man, what is wrong with you? And you're condoning mass murder, and you're enabling mass murder, and all you can do is curse because the other guy is pushing you around.
Here's an interesting clip. A lot of people like you and I, and people who watch the show, and average Americans are kind of sick and tired of Netanyahu and believe that once the war is over, he'll be gone, and maybe even before so, because of a lot of political and legal problems. Yet, here's the opposition. Here's Benny Gantz. Here's the person who will probably replace Netanyahu. Listen to what he says and tell me if you think Netanyahu didn't write it.
The world must know, and Hamas leaders must know, if by Ramadan hostages are not home, the fighting will continue everywhere to include Rafah area. We will do so in coordinated manner, facilitating the evacuation of civilians in dialogue with American and Egyptian partners and to minimize the civilian casualties as much as possible.
Nobody believes the last part of that statement whatsoever, to minimize civilian casualties as much as possible. They haven't done a blankety blank thing to minimize civilian casualties. They have enhanced civilian casualties. They have targeted civilians. Their goal is ethnic cleansing and genocide. I don't mean to be angry, but it's so obvious when they're lying. Let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. If Iran attacks Israel, will Israel use a nuclear weapon? Or let's go back a step. Why doesn't the United States just acknowledge that Israel has nuclear weapons? Why does everybody dance around that as if it's not the truth?
Well, that's a good one. The United States dances around it because the United States gives Israel billions of dollars every year in so-called military aid. And there is a law on the books that the United States cannot give military aid to any country that has a secret nuclear weapons program, which Israel has. So no government official in recent administrations has dared to say that, look, Israel has a 200 nuclear weapon or 400 nuclear weapon arsenal that's secret, and it was obtained by stealing the raw materials and the timers from the United States. And nobody dares to say that, because then we'd have to stop giving them money. Can you imagine that?
Did they actually steal this from the United States?
Sure, they stole the uranium, the enriched uranium, from a company in Pennsylvania called NUMEC, which was owned by a Jewish gentleman who cooperated with, Benjamin Netanyahu was involved in the operation. And they also stole the igniters for the system, the starters, from a company in California with a similar ruse carried out to obtain the technical equipment they needed to make the bombs. So this stuff was stolen from us, and a congressman, a government official, cannot even tell the truth, which is known by the whole world, that Israel has a nuclear arsenal, and under the Samson option, has threatened to use it on places like Rome.
Rome. What would Israel have against Rome and the Vatican?
Israel, the Samson option, this was Seymour Hersh did a book on this. The Samson option was Israel's view that if they were attacked by overwhelming force and were about to go under, they would, quote, take the rest of the world with them.
Wow. If the Israelis used a nuclear weapon on Tehran, do we know what kind of damage it would do? Do we know what it would do to the regional economy, to the infrastructure?
Well, it depends what kind of attack the Israelis did. I mean, with 200 nuclear weapons, they could destroy Iran, obviously. But the fact is that what's been talked about in Israel defense circles has been using their nukes just to eliminate Iran's military capabilities. In other words, their ability to strike back. So that's probably more realistically what we would see, because then Israel would retain still its nuclear weapons, and of course the U.S. would cover for them.
Do you think that the U.S. or Moscow or Beijing would get involved if the Israelis used nuclear weapons on Tehran?
Well, Russia might, but I can't see the United States ever summoning up the courage, the backbone to do anything about Israel. I mean, we've just seen so much of this over the course of 75 years. USS Liberty attacked by Israel, 36 sailors killed, 200 plus more wounded, and there was never an inquiry. Lyndon Johnson. So this is a poison in the system. We are like slaves, and every time we get patted on the head, we say, thank you very much, Mr. Netanyahu.
Well, we'll leave it at that, Phil. It's a pleasure to talk to you because you're so refreshingly clear and over the top, intellectually honest, even though these topics are a downer, to say the least. But thank you, dear Phil. Thank you personally from my team and, of course, from the audience. We'll see you again next week.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Okay, of course. All the best. Coming up tomorrow, my dear friends, just bear with me a minute so I have this right. Matt Van Dyke at 9 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. I know a lot of you thought he had gone to heaven, but apparently he hasn't, not yet. 11 o'clock, Colonel McGregor. 2 o'clock, Professor Mearsheimer. Wow, a nice lineup. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.